Steve, I would just like to reflect on some of these specific situations of gospel advance across the nations. You and I, we live with this on a daily basis. We get news, we pray, we live in these spaces, in these situations of gospel advance. However, I would like to bring the whole of Regions Beyond on board with that and excite them and thrill them with the very things that are actually exciting us at the moment. What is exciting at the moment that you are living with? Can you share something?
Yeah, well, it's funny, I think you know me. I often look back in order to celebrate as we push forward.
Yeah.
And I can remember as Heather and I first arrived in Dubai, where you're now based, carrying the load there. And I was carrying my heart that, as a movement, we'd become so fluid in terms of people coming and going. It was one of the dreams I had. And on one of the first meetings, the Friday mornings, we used to meet on Fridays, this prophecy came, and Cami Pereira brought this word that I think my heart wanted to just burst, because he said, like Moses, God's saying, look to the north, look to the south, the east, the west, all this I will give you. And that's what I was carrying as we moved in there. And so now to see it in reality, we have churches in the east, we have churches in the west, north, south. It's full of buds, as it were. And yes, there's a lot of space to fill, but it really is a joy. And so even to watch what you and the team did in Mexico with John and Flor recently, I sit in Southern Africa and I'm watching this unfold, and I'm thinking, wow, this is what we dreamed of. Hearing about Cristiano in Brazil was such a joy. And then following your recent journey to the east when you went to South Korea, tell us about that one.
Yeah, that was amazing, because I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that, like in the Bible where God opens the door, I felt God speak to me about the east. I didn't know what to expect. But we ended up in South Korea. We did 6 cities in 8 days, just moving from place to place. But we finally got to the island of Jeju, which is where Mordecai has now finally moved to. And we saw the grace of God in what God is doing in his life. And as we speak now, he's established a church there. There's a plant. It's in its early days, but actually you can see how God's hand is upon them. So now for Regions Beyond, there's a South Korean plant that's underway. So that's really exciting. And before that, I've just gone to Malaysia, and I saw the evidence again of the grace of God with JW and Melinda and their children, who had just moved from Utrecht in the Netherlands and are now based in Penang and now about to start the work. And just seeing one thing after another. And also, as I reflected on the first video about couples moving nation, Carmel and Isaac had just got married, and they're now in the Philippines and advancing the gospel again. You're thinking, wow, this is amazing. This is what we are giving our lives to. And now I've just spoken to Matt and Abby, who are moving country. They're moving from the United States, and they will finally arrive in the Philippines in November, in order to establish themselves there, work alongside Kim and Smile, and see the gospel bear fruit. And that's in the East. So God has been good.
Yes.
Among us.
And if you consider that Kim and Smile have been carrying this word, an incredible word about taking a boat to the north, and then during our gathering in Clarence for the next gen, how God was specific about that and said Tier 1.
Yes.
And so you've got the Deasons moving in, you've got them being freed up, and you just think this strengthening taking place is such a joy.
Next week, Kim and Smile will be going to Taiwan, actually, because they believe God is starting to stir things there. So they are going to go there to see what God is going to do. They've got connections now. Things are beginning to shape up. And this is what, as we call the whole family of Regions Beyond, to just pray, to give themselves during this time of gospel advance, but also to sow into what God is doing. This is the story. This is what we are giving into as a family.
Very good. I know, and the exciting thing for us, we're now based in Clarence again at our home, and we've seen such a change in the momentum in Southern Africa and Africa. There's a real stirring. God reminded us of a prophetic word brought in the late 90s, and it promised a wind stirring in the south of Africa.
Amazing.
And starting to blow north and being joined from the east and the west with different winds. And as they join together, the gospel will continue to go through Africa. And we're starting to see it happen. We've got very exciting adventure in Johannesburg. Rory and Leanne are really starting to establish a significant church in Johannesburg. We now have another opening in Johannesburg, which is going to strengthen our hand.
Wow.
But then I think for Heather and I, also a great joy is to see Cameron, Loreen, our eldest son and daughter and grandchildren, returning from the United States to Cape Town, where we will be planting what's going to be known as City Light Church.
Wow.
in Cape Town, in Kenilworth. And so the churches in the Western Cape are joining together, getting ready for this plant next year. And so, as we call on all of you to sow into this offering, these are the things that your hard-earned finances will provide for. It's just very exciting. It's a wonderful adventure.
Steve, how could we miss India in this amazing
Yes,
work? You've just come back from India,
I have,
and
yeah.
seeing you,
Yeah.
talking to you over
Yeah.
Zoom and seeing your heart,
Yeah.
and for India and what you were living with, it felt like God just brought something that you had been living with into fruition.
Yeah, I think, speaking honestly, and I'm sure our Indian brothers, particularly the leaders, would understand my heart, but we started off with a very fragile situation.
Yeah.
They'd been through a lot, and it took a few years to find our togetherness, to strengthen our belief in the purposes of God. But Mike Irving, Lynn and Mike, myself, we went across the Advanced Conference, and to be honest with you, we could lift up what's happening in India as a plumb line for Regions Beyond and
Amazing.
say, could everybody do it like this?
Yeah,
Because their vision, the next generations, their joy of being together is just beyond words. And to see the church plants, in each evening they talk about church plants, but because there were so many,
Yes.
they had to do a few on each evening of the conference. So of course, Mike and I are sitting there and we're looking at each other thinking, what's
What is
happening
this?
here,
Yeah.
And you've got Nigel and Franco and Donald and Colin and all these dear brothers, Edgar, and they're just overflowing with what God's doing. And I think the very exciting one for me that I really took hold of was the plant into Calcutta.
That's amazing.
Which was birthed through ministry to the poor, embracing the poor.
Wow.
That was the door we went through.
That's
And
amazing.
now it's birthing a church. But we could do that in another video.
Yeah,
I think.
we'll reflect on our work on
Yeah.
in another video. As you can see, Regions Beyond family, this is not just what we are doing together. This is us as a family together, nations coming together, praying, supporting one another. But also, we are in partnership together. And it's amazing that we have become an apostolic people group across the nations as we see God open up new nations, new towns, new countries for us. So I'm really excited that actually there is more in the next video.
That's quite right. Apostolic People Group. That gives me joy.
Amazing.
Wonderful.